Are the Denver Broncos potentially preparing to move up in the first round of the NFL draft to select a star offensive player? Is Nikola Jokic tightening, or has he tightened the MVP race enough to make it a photo finish? And will Gabe Landeskog truly be ready to rejoin the Colorado Avalanche for postseason caliber hockey? All things to come on today's rundown, but we begin in the NFL, where with the draft just about a week away, we are getting some more whispers potentially about what the Broncos may look to do in the first round and early in the upcoming draft. Both of them, ironically, come at the running back position. Ashton Jeanty is the star running back of this year's draft class. He finished second in the Heisman Trophy voting behind Colorado's Travis Hunter and had a career and all-time great collegiate season at the running back position, leading the NCAA in carries, yards, etc. for Boise State, who made a college football playoff push this past season. And while early mocks seem to favor Jeanty maybe sliding down into the range of the 20th overall pick where the Broncos currently sit, momentum quickly seemed to shift in the other direction as Jeanty is now projected to go as high as 5th overall in the NFL draft to the Jacksonville Jaguars, but likely landing somewhere between 5 and 14, probably on the furthest back end. But Ashton Jeanty, in a recent interview, when he was asked about teams that were speaking with him and who maybe rose above the rest or stuck out amongst their peers during the combine and pre-draft process, Jeanty said, quote, really, the Denver Broncos. They were heavy on me, and the Raiders, they were heavy. Like, we were talking the most. They were talking to me the whole time. So there you have it right there. Two AFC West teams in the Denver Broncos and the Raiders. The Raiders significantly more in position to try to draft Jeanty if they want, sitting inside the top 10 versus the Broncos at 20. But the Denver Broncos clearly have done their homework on all the running backs in this class. But the fact that they spoke to Jeanty at length means that they are at least considering the possibility of negotiating a trade to move up and select what is pretty unanimously considered not only the best running back in this class, but potentially a top 3 prospect overall in this draft behind Abdul Carter, the edge rusher who's projected to go as high as 2 or 3 to the Browns or Giants, and Travis Hunter, who is also projected to go as high as 2 or 3 to the Browns or Giants, behind only Cam Ward, who almost certainly feels like is going to be the number 1 overall selection to the Tennessee Titans. The question then becomes, is it worth it? Is Ashton Jeanty, who despite being lauded as a generational prospect and who has put tape on the field to suggest that he is going to be a difference maker at the NFL level, the likes of which we saw perhaps with Derrick Henry, who was a Heisman Trophy winner and collegiate standout before transitioning to the NFL, and frankly, Saquon Barkley with the resurgence of the running back position. Barkley goes from the Giants to the Eagles and in one season helps that team as the focal point of the fulcrum of that offense to a Super Bowl victory over the Kansas City Chiefs. We saw the likes of Aaron Jones switch teams and be productive. Derrick Henry going from the Titans to the Ravens and changing the dynamic of that offense. The resurgence of the running back in this past season is going to give a bump to that position at the NFL level, the same way that I believe Brock Bowers, with the success that he has as one of currently maybe the best tight ends in the NFL as a rookie, is going to give to the tight ends like Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland, Terrence Ferguson, and the like in this year's draft. So is Jeanty worth that much to a Denver Broncos team that has kickstarted their rebuild in the first year of Bo Nix, where they finished significantly ahead of expectations nationally, frankly, even here locally, and maybe if you gave Sean Payton a closed door and a shot of truth serum, ahead of where their own head coach thought that they might be in year one, as cocky as he has been. But the price to move up is something that has to be factored into play here, because the Broncos, in order to truly give themselves a chance to move ahead to draft Ashton Jeanty, they're going to have to move into the back end of the top 10. The Saints currently sit at number 9. The Bears at number 10, who, just like the Broncos, took a quarterback last year and are looking for offensive pieces to build around him in Caleb Williams. So you probably have to get ahead of the Bears at 10. You want to get ahead of the Saints at 9. And the Carolina Panthers, sitting at 8, are the team that is for sale. So that has been speculated and reported out there that the Carolina Panthers, who are potentially looking to shop some of their star players and are open for business at number 8 to try to amass draft picks to truly begin to restock the cupboards there in Carolina. So moving up from 20 to 8, 12 selections essentially, is not going to be cheap. And for George Payton, who traditionally speaking during his tenure as the lead draft voice and general manager of the Denver Broncos, he prefers having more darts to throw at a board than sacrificing darts to try to hit a bullseye. And that is a difference in philosophy between he and Sean Payton, who has shown no hesitation, I should say, during his tenure in New Orleans, and even in the first couple of years here with the Broncos, to move up if he pinpoints and locks in on a particular player at a particular position that he wants. He will sacrifice to move up and make that selection. So whose voice wins? Sean Payton, I think, has earned a lot of cachet and cred, not just for his NFL tenure and the experience that he has brought as an NFL head coach, but with what he's been able to do in calling his own shot and then proving it in the short term during the Bo Nix rookie season, where he took the 6th quarterback taken off the board in the first round and then put that quarterback in a position to be neck and neck for Rookie of the Year, at least perception-wise, with Jaden Daniels, even though the standings may not have fallen out that way. So if it's the voice that wins in Sean Payton, this becomes much more likely. But the Denver Broncos also have other needs and holes to fill. Who is going to be the true wide receiver 2 or, frankly, wide receiver 1 for the Denver Broncos this season? And how much of that hinges on Courtland Sutton's potential negotiations with the Broncos that we spoke of yesterday? Because we saw what happened when Courtland and his camp didn't get what they wanted last offseason, where he sat out of the beginning of offseason programming, mandatory minicamp and OTAs, before the Broncos reworked a deal to front load and give some incentives and opportunities to make more money. Can you draw from that same well twice? And if not, you've probably got to add to this wide receiver room in a meaningful way to couple with Marvin Mims and the continued progression of guys like Devon Vele, Troy Franklin, etc. So are you willing to sacrifice potentially bringing in depth at wide receiver, bringing in depth at corner or defensive tackle or even inside linebacker or tight end? Because you signed Evan Ingram as your joker in free agency, but Evan Ingram's on the north side of 30 here shortly, and may not have the same impact with the Broncos that he had 2 years ago with the Jaguars, where he had 100+ reception season and 1,000 yards, and how we saw him flash early in his career when he was drafted by the New York Giants. So if you're going to move up to get Jeanty, you have to be willing to part ways with at least 1 or potentially 2 of the ideal picking slots that you'd like for those other positions. And I question whether or not, frankly, that's worth it, because the Broncos, who are meeting with Travion Henderson literally today, the Ohio State running back, who, of course, had a 1,000-yard and almost 30-catch season this past season, despite having Quinshon Judkins, another top maybe 6 or 7 running back prospect in the NFL draft, alongside him to split carries with. He is visiting with the Broncos today, visited with the Steelers yesterday, who ironically picked 21st. And they've spoken with Quinshon Judkins and plenty of other running backs in the draft. So for me, if I'm the Denver Broncos, I don't know that I'm willing to move forward in the NFL draft or move up 12 spots to move into the top 10 for anything other than a quarterback, frankly. And the Broncos in Bo Nix already have that. There's a price that changes everybody's mind, and there's certainly a deal or a number where I think that could work. But for my dollars to donuts money right now, I do not think moving up that high for Ashton Jeanty, which is, again, into the top 10, which is where I think it would take, and we're using Carolina at number 8 as the example, I do not think it is worth sacrificing the draft capital this year and even potentially next year, or to lessen the draft capital impact, moving a high-profile player to the Carolina Panthers is worth it, in my opinion, when you can still get potentially an Omarion Hampton on the back end of the first round, or maybe move up a smaller amount to do that. Travion Henderson, who initially it may have been projected as a reach maybe to take Travion Henderson that early in the draft, but it's becoming less so that is the popular opinion now. We heard from our friend James Palmer, who does a podcast with Steve Smith, where they break down different prospects and analyze and dissect things from a player perspective. And their consensus was that Travion Henderson would not be a reach at that position, or at that pick at number 20, and would fill other needs beyond just being an impact in the running game, as he is a capable pass catcher out of the backfield and pass blocker in pass protection, which we know is important to Sean Payton, because that was the calling card that kept Javonte Williams so strongly in the fold last season, despite the fact that he was so ineffective as a runner. So when you're adding all of these things up and all the other factors that are at play with other needs that this team still needs to hold and build depth toward, I do not want to see the Broncos right now moving that high and sacrificing that kind of capital to try to take a chance on Jeanty, who, despite being lauded, like I said, as a generational type prospect and an instant difference maker, is still an unproven commodity. A proven commodity in the NBA, as we've gotten to know over the last 6 or 7 years, is Nikola Jokic. The Joker is, in my mind, and has been for about 4 or 5 consecutive years now, the best player on planet Earth that dribbles a basketball. And the MVP discourse, similar to how it was when Joel Embiid won the MVP over Nikola Jokic, preventing him from three-peating for 3 consecutive years, has been pretty exhaustive over the course of the season. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the standout guard for the Oklahoma City Thunder, who are by and large the runaway team in the Western Conference and projected to be the representative in the NBA Finals potentially for the West, has been the prohibitive favorite for most of the year. And despite the fact that Nikola Jokic may be having one of, if not the greatest offensive seasons of all time, and from an efficiency standpoint and an effectiveness standpoint, one of the greatest seasons of all time, it is still pretty widely looked at by a lot of NBA voices, nationally and here locally, that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander will finish the season as the league's MVP for the 2024-2025 season. But Zach By here at our station at 104 Through the Fan, and others even nationally, have floated the notion that the talking heads that we see on ESPN or Fox Sports or the like, and the player podcasts whose clips go viral, are not truly indicative at times of the way that the voters who specifically cast votes on this award feel about the quality of basketball being played and the two people who are clear frontrunners to win it. And that the landslide that it may be seeming might not be as drastic as it appears on paper. And I think there has been evidence to that of late, as Nikola Jokic has finished the season in one of the stronger ways possible, even with the lofty bar that he sets. He's had multiple career high games in scoring. He had a 60, 10, and 10 triple-double, the 61 points, making it the highest scoring, most prolific points triple-double in NBA history. And his team was able to maintain the 4 seed in the West, giving them home court advantage in the first round of the postseason, despite firing their head coach and general manager with just 3 games left in the regular season. And my question today is, are we looking at a potential photo finish, despite the fact that if you look on your sportsbook apps and your gambling sites, the odds are showing lengthy gaps between the two and have for most of the season. And Vegas traditionally doesn't miss the mark by that much. The experts in the desert, traditionally speaking, have their heads on straight enough to make it a puncher's chance that they've got it straightened out. But man, when you start to hear more and more prominent players and national voices shift from pretty decently in the SGA camp over to Nikola Jokic, it at least starts to beg a question. Bill Simmons, who's one of the more respected voices in NBA media, on his podcast recently laid out a lot of transparency about his thoughts for NBA MVP this season. He said, quote, "That 60, 10, and 10 game really messed with my head. He was so good in that game that it's just like, what are we doing?" If you ask anyone in the NBA who the best player in the league is, they're all going to say Jokic. Like all of them, it's Jokic. And Ryan Russillo, who is a respected NBA voice and collaborates a lot with Bill Simmons, already put forward his opinion, saying his MVP vote is not that difficult for him to iron out. He is voting for Nikola Jokic because at some point, given the magnitude of the season that Nikola Jokic is having, it is a disservice, in my opinion, to the game of basketball, to the integrity of the voting process and the meaning of the award itself, to look at the season that Nikola Jokic is having from a pure offensive dominance scoring standpoint. He is top 3 in points, assists, rebounds, and steals in the same season. No other player, dollars to donuts, has finished a season top 10 in that category. He became the first center and third player ever, joining his teammate Russell Westbrook and Oscar Robertson in averaging a triple-double for an NBA season as a center, no less. So at some point, it starts to become disingenuous to the award, to basketball, and to the integrity of the process to look those things in the face. Even if there is another MVP season and worthy candidate like SGA, and say that this person, this player in Nikola Jokic, is not the most valuable and best player in the NBA, regardless of how many times he's won it in the last 5 years. And the notion of it's this player's turn, which is how a lot of the discourse unraveled after Joel Embiid's MVP award, and how it's similarly felt at some point with SGA, that real basketball minds and people who take this process seriously and vote on this award are not going to want to find themselves 10 years from now on the wrong side of history for voting in line with a consensus and denying conventional wisdom in the process. When it comes to conventional wisdom, there's definitely a split on how to handle the return of Gabriel Landeskog to the Colorado Avalanche ahead of their postseason matchup with the Dallas Stars, which of course will feature former hometown favorite and familiar face Mikko Rantanen, who made his way to Dallas by way of Carolina after departing from the Avalanche in January of this year. And I think that there's 2 schools of thought that you can approach this with, and both of them kind of fall under the title of today's episode, which you may notice at the top of the screen there, is a Latin phrase that was used in the Roman Empire centuries ago and has been picked up at times by the United States Marines. It was featured in movies like John Wick, and that statement is Fortis fortuna adjuvat. And what it translates loosely to is fortune favors the bold, the brave, the courageous, right? And I think that all 3 of the topics that we have discussed today can kind of follow an underlying theme with that phrase, fortune favors the bold, the brave, the courageous, however you want to translate it. Because when you're looking at the Denver Broncos, moving up 12 spots in the NFL draft to take an unproven commodity at the running back position, no less, despite the wave that we saw this past season and the resurgence of the importance of the running back position, moving up that many spots to take a running back, even one like Ashton Jeanty, that's bold, okay? That would require a significant amount of courage, and it would be a dice roll that could have lasting ramifications if wrong, but could provide an absolute spark plug if right. So for Sean Payton and George Payton, there is a little bit of consideration to that regard when it comes to their draft plan in April. For Nikola Jokic and the NBA MVP voting process, I do think from a voter perspective, when there's such a strong narrative and consensus going one way, when the entire NBA world for the majority of a season is zigging, I do think it takes some courage and a level of boldness and bravery to zag the other way in favor of a player like Nikola Jokic, who, despite having one of, if not the greatest offensive NBA seasons in history, is having to seemingly fight a narrative for relevance in the MVP discussion and avoid being dismissed, which 10, 15 years from now will maybe be looked at more poorly than it is currently in this moment as we sit here. But perhaps the greatest parallel to that phrase, fortune favors the bold, is the decision that Chris McFarland is going to have to make as he is set to speak here to the media in the next 20, 30 minutes or so after the Avalanche finish their practice today. And I would imagine calling the people together here before the start of the playoffs this weekend, the main focal point is to discuss what the plan is for Gabriel Landeskog. And if he does return for the Colorado Avalanche, which I predict that he probably will, there is going to be a lot of eyeballs and speculation and hand-wringing over what to do with him, how he looks, and whether or not he, despite the legacy that he has as a member of the Avs, as the captain, is the right fit for what they need right now. We were all in awe, and it was like a teary-eyed, special, milestone-level moment when Gabe returned to the ice up in Loveland for the Colorado Eagles and then ended up playing in back-to-back games. But there is a legitimate question to be had about whether or not Gabe Landeskog is ready not just to return to hockey at the NHL level, but whether or not he's able to return to hockey at the NHL playoff level for a Stanley Cup contending team who is facing a vaunted opponent in the Dallas Stars that, happens to feature one of the more prominent members of the Avalanche locker room in Mikko Rantanen. So the fork in the road for Chris McFarland is, and this is where the boldness and the courage and the bravery comes in, is you've basically got two options in my mind. You either dig in your heels and say Gabe Landeskog is our captain, his importance to this team is unrivaled, and even if he is not 100% back to being ready for playoff caliber hockey at the NHL level when the Dallas Stars come to town, or I should say when they go to Dallas this weekend, we are sticking with Gabe, and he is our guy. And even if he's not ready now, we think he will get ready in a hurry. Or you take the other side, and if you're Chris McFarland, you say, Gabe is our captain, he is in our hearts and the soul of our team forever, but we have a mission that we have been on all season, and it is what's best for the team and the importance of what we have on the table right now with the transactions, the 9 transactions that have unfolded from revamping the goalie room to finding another solution at 2C in Brock Nelson to adding depth pieces like Jack Drury, replacing Mikko Rantanen with Marty Necas, Charlie Coyle and Ryan Lindgren. All of these moves have geared toward a push the chips into the center of the table season, and that postseason run begins now. And Gabe Landeskog, as much as we love and appreciate him, it is not the time to try to reintegrate him now. So those are the two choices that Chris McFarland has. And I think, frankly, even though one seems much more popular and pulls at the heartstrings a little more, I think both sides of this fork have a valid argument to be the correct path. If you ask Nathan MacKinnon which side he leans on, I think he made it pretty transparent. He said, quote, he's Gabe Landeskog at the end of the day. Obviously, there's going to be some rust. 3 years is a crazy amount of time off. I think he looks great. And in-game situations, you can still see those instincts are there. He's still got it for sure. Nathan MacKinnon, Cale Makar, and a host of other Avs were in attendance at Blue FCU Arena up in Loveland to watch Gabe's return to the Eagles. It is clear that his status and presence within the locker room and within the organization has not lost a step in the 1,020 days before he came back to playing hockey in any kind of meaningful sense. But this is a decision that Chris McFarland is going to have to make. We did see before going live today that Landeskog was out skating on the ice in practice, and he was wearing a green jersey, which initially was speculation that maybe he could appear on the third line and practice with the third line, which, as we talked about the other day, would be a transactional move like bumping Joel Kiviranta down to the fourth line and Parker Kelly kind of moving down to that fifth line scratch line. But then when practice actually unfolded, Landeskog was skating with the fifth line of Miles Wood, Jimmy Vesey, and others who are projected to be playoff scratches early on in this postseason. So Chris McFarland's response in his upcoming media availability and how he addresses this is going to give us the clarity that right now we simply don't have, because there's a path for Gabe and it's been laid out, and he's wearing the jersey that color corresponds with a specific line, but he wasn't skating with that line when practice actually unfolded. And then you get into the discussion of, well, maybe he's a scratch to start the series and we reintegrate him later. And to that, I would say this. For lack of a better phraseology, you can't get half pregnant, okay? You're either all in or you're all out. In my opinion, that is the discourse that you need to take. If you're Chris McFarland, with the bravery and boldness and courage that it might take to make a decision like that, you either say, Gabe's our man and we are sticking with him thick or thin, or this team has put too much and we have invested enough in this postseason run, pushing our chips into the center of the table with all of the wheeling and dealing that has taken place. We've waited 3 years for Gabe Landeskog, and we can wait a little longer, even if it means we will see you in training camp next season. And which path is the right path to take? I don't know. I think that I might lean toward the non-Gabe Landeskog angle, but because I don't think that's the angle they are going to take, and because I can't aggressively fault them for not doing it, my only follow-up request is jump in with both feet. Don't make it a situation where both the team and us in the media and you, the fan base, are wondering game to game, is Gabe going to be there? Is he not? Is it third line? Is it fourth line? What's the penalty kill situation? What's the power play situation? All of it. Don't leave anything else to chance and leave any more guessing than is already going to be in place. Jump in or jump out. That is my advice to Chris McFarland. I thank you all so much for joining me. We will catch up with you again tomorrow at the same time in the same place. It's an exciting time. Avs and Nugs postseasons are about to begin. The Broncos are going to have a massive franchise impacting decision to make at number 20 or higher in the upcoming draft. And we are going to be here for all of it. So stay tuned, stay blessed, and let's go have a day.
I do what I love what I do. Second nature to put in the work.